What is going on, guys? Today I bring you another episode of the journey to National Master, and today we continue Torneio Fechado do Marquês with my third round. My opponent was José Dias, 1470 rated player, and he had the white pieces, I had the black pieces. Let's see how the game went. So my opponent opened with d4, went d5, knight f3, knight f6, and so far so good. Pretty normal opening, and here my opponent completely threw me off with h3. And yes, I'm not joking, my opponent did play h3 here after pretty much no time thinking. And here I just didn't know what to do, of course, because never seen h3 on the third move. Of course, this is a big troll moves. Honestly, I thought about bishop f5, kind of playing a London system, but I didn't really like this because just I would get it with g4 with tempo, and then like bishop g6, knight h4 maybe in the future. Then like my queen side gets a little bit weak. These light squares, get a little bit weak without the bishop supporting them. Maybe my opponent could hit me with a quick c4, bishop b, queen b3, something like that, like weird. I also thought about just e6, trying to play in sort of a Queen's Gambit decline style, but when your opponent throws h3 at you, like you kind of want to punish him immediately, right? At least that's how I felt. And yeah, I thought about a lot of moves: g6, c5, b6, something like that. And I ended up playing c5 because I have always heard when your opponent is playing on the wings, you should counter strike on the center of the board, and c5 is indeed a good move that immediately asks and poses a question to white. Here my opponent quickly took on c5, and here my first instinct was to play knight c6 and just say, okay, I'm gonna go e5 next, and I'm gonna play this in a sort of Queen's Gambit accepted with colors reversed style, and argue that the move h3 didn't really make any sense in these kind of positions. But after thinking for a while, I actually just decided to... No, actually, I thought of this before playing c5, but I just played g6. And yeah, g6 is not the best move, actually. It's not really good. It's actually like quite a mistake. But here the idea with g6 was to play in sort of a Catalan style position with colors reversed, and argued that this move h3 is just a waste of time, and if my opponent tries to just hold on to this pawn, he will be way behind in development and I'll be completely fine. And yeah, that was my thought process for choosing g6. Here my opponent played c3, and I was like, okay, let me just keep going with my plan, bishop g7. And here my opponent plays bishop b3, I castled, and knight bd2. And I was very happy to see this because, I mean, this bishop b3 just looks ridiculous, just blocking the e pawn. I mean, this knight bd2, okay, it's fine, but yeah, it just feels like white is very cramped, and I already have castled. I have my some pieces out well, and yeah, it feels like this pawn is not really gonna be this extra pawn, double pawn on the c file, will not really be a huge deal for him. But yeah, here I just played knight bd7 to try to keep developing my pieces. He played knight b3. It wouldn't make much difference the order of those moves, so I just played e5, and here my opponent played the best move. Kind of surprised me at first, I didn't consider it, which was g4. But yeah, g4 kind of makes a lot of sense. And now my opponent is asking me a question like, how do you want to deal with the threat of g5? Because of course, if I do nothing, let's say I just play queen c7, this would be an horrible move, because after g5 I have to move my knight, and after I move it to h5, the pawn on d5 is hanging, so I just lose a pawn, and I'm completely worse. So here after g4 I quickly just went e4, and yeah, I didn't really want to make this move so quickly, but it kind of was forced because of the threat of g5. At least I thought that. And here I was expecting like knight fd4, and yeah, I didn't really exactly know what I was gonna do here. But my opponent's, like, to my surprise, he played knight h2, which I think is way inferior because this knight is super misplaced. And yeah, here I just defended the threat of g5 with knight e5, bringing the knight closer to the center, and kind of, I mean, this knight has really good prospects for the future, controlling f3, maybe jumping to c4, harass this bishop. Yeah, I was feeling good. And here my opponent played bishop f4, and I just played knight c4, and I was very happy with my position. I'm already threatening knight takes b2. Here my opponent plays queen c1, and here I can add a long time to think here. Of course, the computer says that I'm significantly better, even though I'm down a pawn, but material is not everything whatsoever. And yeah, you just see my pieces. I'm castled. My pieces are better placed. These pieces of white are just so uncoordinated. But here, I was kind of thinking for a long while and trying to figure out what is my priority here. And I really felt like that if I allowed my opponent to play e3 and I mean, maybe taking the knight on c4, which I don't know if it's really something he wants to do, but maybe just e3 and bishop g2 castle and consolidate. I thought, that doesn't look too impressive for me. If I just let him breathe castle and have like a comfortable position up a pawn, I didn't think that I should allow that. And here I decided to go all in, pretty much, go all balls deep here with e3. And e3 is a second pawn sacrifice with the idea of keeping white's king in the middle and pressuring his position because he's not castled here. Here I thought, bishop e3, I thought about this for a long time, but my idea was really to just put a lot of pressure on white's position with something like knight e4 here. And yeah, my pieces are super active. I'm already actually threatening to take on b2, and after queen takes, to take the pawn on c3. So I have a lot of threats. This king is still in the middle, and yeah, it's a very, very complicated position where I'm just playing for activity, initiative, and yeah, it's just crazy, honestly. But to my surprise, my opponent actually took with the f-pawn, which is pretty much worse than taking with the bishop. And yeah, here I just instantly played the best move, which is kind of easy, knight e4. And here I was very, very happy with my position because I have so many threats. I have the threat of queen h4 check, pretty much just winning the game on the spot. I have the threat of taking on b2 because the queen can't take the pawn. And yeah, I was feeling very good. And here my opponent kind of started thinking, because yeah, this is no longer comfortable for him at all. Here he played knight f3, which I think it's kind of a decent move, a good move, because it's stopping the threat of queen to h4. But here I just took on b2 as I planned. And here, the computer already gives like -3. It says that my position is just overwhelming and it's just completely winning. And it kind of looks like completely winning with white's king still in the middle, 2 stacks of double pawns. Like, pieces are super uncoordinated. Like, my pieces are just so active, and yeah, I was feeling very good here. and feeling very confident. After knight takes b2, my opponent played knight d4, trying to close up the diagonal, which is nice. And here I played knight a4 with the idea of putting pressure on c3 twice and also c5. And after bishop g2, of course, my opponent is trying to develop and castle, and there's no real way for me to stop him from castling. And you know, here I spent quite some time as well, because I didn't know what pawn should I take. Should I take the c3 pawn? Should I take the c5 pawn? I spent a lot of time here, and I really didn't know which pawn was more important to take. I ended up taking the pawn on c3 because I thought that my knight would be better here on c3, and also I thought that this pawn would be weak and I could just capture it and be up a pawn. And also, like, what I didn't like about knight takes c5 was that my opponent could have some ideas with you know, c4, trying to, you know, free up his position and kind of loosen up my knights here. So yeah, I didn't really like this break that I would allow to my opponent. So I just took on c3, it's completely fine. If so, knight c3, castles, and here I played queen a5. So my idea was simple, I just wanted to be a pawn up and capture on c6. My opponent played queen c2 and I just captured on c5, and I'm up a pawn. And a couple moves ago I was down to pawns, and now I'm up a pawn, so I was, you know, I was feeling good, I was feeling myself. Here my opponent played rook ac1, and you know, I didn't really like this spin here, with maybe threats of moving the knight away, and then you know, putting a lot of pressure on my queen, on my other knight. So I just decided to sidestep all of this with queen e7. The computer doesn't really love this, but yeah, whatever. Also, I felt like it was kind of a decent move because I'm stopping the knight from coming to e5 here, because I'm protecting it twice, this square. And here my opponent played queen d3, which I thought it was actually a weird move, but at the same time I kind of respected it more. The more I looked at it, the more I respected this move. And my first idea was, bro, it's just take another pawn, it's just hanging, right? But like, looking at this position more like closely, I thought that, you know, rook c7, and this position is super uncomfortable because now I have to move my queen again. Let's say I move it to e8, and I thought that you know, after queen b3, I mean, I'm just screwed. Like, he's way more active. Apparently after rook c7, I would be just fine playing bishop d7 and just not caring about this pawn falling, because I can just come back with my knight. But it was really hard for me to actually go into this position. It just looks weird, all these pins on my pieces, and I don't like how loose my position is, and is like kind of active all of a sudden. And so here, because of the threat of rook takes c3, I just played queen a3. I wasn't really proud of this move, but at the same time I kind of felt like I had to stop this threat some way, and maybe I'm threatening to take on a2 because it's like easier to take with the queen and just maybe move to c4 and force a queen trade or something like that. But yeah, here my opponent played rook c2, and I was like, okay, he just wants to double on the c file, which is it's definitely a move. And you know, I was like, damn, bro, this game is way more complicated than it should be, in my opinion. And yeah, it's kind of tough to for me to understand what's really going on in this position. And I ended up playing bishop d7 because I thought that it was natural to develop my pieces. Also, you know, if he doubles the rooks here on the c file, I thought that just rook a c8 and like these knights are protected, are well protected. My bishop is coming out. This bishop also putting some pressure, and yeah, I thought that my position would be really good here, and it actually is really good here. But after bishop d7, my opponent quickly played knight e5, which, you know, I was kind of afraid, but you know, I felt like, okay, I had some resources here to deal with this. Of course, I didn't want to take on e5, which is actually one of the best moves. After takes, just rook fc8. Actually, the computer really likes this for black, but I didn't want to give up my dark square bishop for his knight, because I thought that later in the game, like these dark squares being super weak would actually matter a lot, and I felt like I was gonna be in trouble if I just gave up the bishop, dark square bishop like that. But yeah, also another move that I was thinking for, like, here probably was my biggest thing of the game, because I felt like this position was very critical, you know. There's a lot of threats, there's a lot of moves that I can play. Of course, I was calculating bishop a4, and this is the best move, and this is like the critical move here. Of course, I kind of played bishop d7 also with the idea of going a4 maybe in the future. But here I just couldn't come up with a solution for his threat. And yeah, the main thing that was really worrying me was just rook takes c3. And I'll go over this in just a second. But for example, you know, I wasn't worried about, I calculated all of this, by the way. I wasn't worried about bishop e4. Of course, I can't take the bishop with the knight because my queen is hanging. Also, I can't really take the bishop with the pawn because my knight was hanging. So here I actually have a resource. If my opponent plays bishop takes e4, I actually have bishop takes c2, which is the kind of move that saves everything, because now his queen is attacked. He can't really take, I mean, if he takes the bishop, which is, yeah, it's kind of forced. Now I can take the bishop, and you know, I just want a piece, so let's go. He can't take the knight here. If he takes, for example, the bishop with the knight here, I can just take on e4 with the pawn, and bishop takes e4 doesn't work for him, so I'm good. Let's look at the other options. And you know, I was looking really at the only option that he had, which was rook takes c3, and I couldn't come up with a good continuation for me. And you know, the first thing I thought was, okay, I take the rook with the queen, but I didn't like this because my opponent had this tactical resource of bishop takes e4 exclamation mark. Now I can't take the bishop with the pawn because my queen is hanging, and if I take the queen on d3, it just takes back the queen with the bishop. And yeah, I felt like this position, I saw this position, and I felt like I was gonna be worse in this position. My bishop is kind of misplaced. This pawn on d5 is very weak, and yeah, I feel like the knights here are doing a better job than my rook on a8 or f8, and I didn't really like this for black. And indeed, it's uncomfortable. It's the computer also prefers white here. But then I thought, okay, if rook takes c3, queen takes c3 doesn't work, what about knight takes c3? And I kind of thought, okay, nice. This is quite nice because now there's no bishop takes e4. You can't take the knight here, but I saw bishop takes d5, and I'm still up material, but I didn't like my position because I thought that my pieces were very, very misplaced and very, very weak. I mean, rook c8 here I thought, but like this pawn is hanging, but it's a very complicated position where I really just couldn't figure out like something good for me. I just thought that bishop a4 was gonna be a mistake, and I made an horrible move. You know, all these moves that I said, bishop takes e5, bishop a4 were the two best moves according to the engine, and I actually chose the third move of the engine, which is the worst and just leads to a completely lost position. After thinking for more than 25 minutes on this move, I just ended up playing the last move that I calculated, which I barely calculated. I just played queen e7, which is the worst move. And now after the simple knight takes d7, you know, that I definitely saw that he was gonna do, I thought, okay, after queen takes d7, I mean, you can't really take this knight here because I just recapture, and I thought, maybe I'm fine. But no, I'm not fine because my opponent is in time to just sack the rook, which is his whole idea, and I just let him have it, and yeah, we reached this position here. And I want you guys to just look at this position, which, you know, I mean, okay, the material is equal, but come on, like, bishop pair, very strong knight. These rooks can go to the open files and semi-open files, but I mean, this is all loose. d5 is super weak. When I move my rooks, these pawns will also be weak. I don't know, it's crazy. And just compare this position to the position we just looked at after this, like, just look at this position and then look at the other one. Like, I mean, this is 10 times better. Like, okay, he was able to sack the rook, but only for one knight, and this is very complicated, don't get me wrong, but at least, like, it's complicated for both of us. During the game, I didn't compare the two, you know? I was just frustrated that I couldn't come up with a good move in my eyes, and I just ended up playing what I thought was the simplest move. And indeed was the simplest move, but it was also the least critical. And when I said the least critical, it's also the move that just gives my opponent the easiest path to take. If I played bishop a4, I would give a lot of opportunities for my opponent to go wrong. And yeah, I mean, there's no guarantees that he would find the best continuation with rook takes c3, and after knight takes c3, bishop takes d5, and like the position was gonna be super complicated, and I would have like a lot of chances to create problems and to just play a nice game. But I just decided to play the laziest and safest move. I just brought my rook to c8. My opponent played queen b3, attacking the pawn on d5, already exploiting the fact that this pawn is very weak. I pretty much do the only move to defend the pawn. Actually, there's two. I played rook c5. Later, I thought maybe rook c4 would be a little bit better because I'm kind of putting pressure on the knight. But okay, it's not a big deal. Rook c5, and after rook d1, preparing to just bring the knight to somewhere else and put more pressure on d5. Yeah, I just played rook fc8, just trying to control the open file and make use of my rooks. And here my opponent played queen a3, which was a very annoying move to see, putting pressure on this pawn a7. And of course, the first move that I thought was just play a6, but here I'm trying to remember what I didn't like about a6. There was definitely something that I was looking at that I didn't like about oh, I know. Okay, here I didn't like a6 because my opponent had knight b3, and here I thought that this was very, 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 very uncomfortable, because of course I can't go to a5. I have to keep my rook on the 5th rank because this pawn is hanging. So I thought like rook b5, but here even something like e4 kind of scared me, like d4, maybe e3. I don't know about this. This is kind of sketchy, you know. This is kind of sketchy for me. And yeah, I didn't want to move my a6 pawn because I thought that I would just be paralyzed, you know. Like, yeah, this is crazy. Even something like rook b5 and maybe queen a4 here, putting the pin here. This is like so uncomfortable. Like, oh my god, I really didn't want to play a6. Also, the problem with b6 is kind of the same, just knight b3, and like, how are you gonna deal with this d5? So I was like super frustrated, and I really thought the best way to try to handle this position was just accept that I'm just gonna try my best to hold the draw here. And I said, okay, rook c3, with the idea that this rook c3 move sacrifices the pawn but gives me time to play rook c1, because if in this position I just play rook c1, my opponent just takes and the queen is protecting the rook. So I thought, okay, rook c3, queen takes on a7, rook c1, trading the rooks, king f2, and we got this position. I thought, okay, maybe I can hold this. I was already in holding mode, of course, and I think that is completely understandable. Here I just brought my rook back. We were starting to get low on the clock, and yeah, it's just it's tough. Here my opponent played a4, which kind of took me by surprise, but it's actually a very decent move because it just threatens to push a5, a6, and this queen is loose, can't really easily take here. Also, just queen c6 is out of question because of this knight here. So here I actually came up with a very tricky move, which I'm proud. Came up with the second best move, which was bishop f8, and now if my opponent just plays a5 without thinking for a long time, I could win the game with bishop c5, which I was hoping that he fell into this trap. Was hoping that he would fall into this trap because the queen is trapped, but he didn't fall for it. After bishop f8, he played queen a5, played rook c5, knight b3, which I also was trying to exploit because this knight just looks a bit loose, but indeed there was nothing here. I dipped below probably like 2 minutes or something like that. After h6, I really was like feeling out of moves. And yeah, my opponent had probably like 3 or 4 minutes as well. We were in time triple, and I really was trying to hope that my blitz skills that I have, which I don't know, online they are kind of decent, but over the board I don't know. But I was trying to trick him. That was my only chance. After h6, my opponent played queen a7. I played g5, which was a very, very bad move. Just weakens my dark squares too much. Should have just played a random waiting move like king h7 according to the engine. But I just played g5 because I really had to play a move. I was like, with 1 minute on the clock, I just couldn't figure out anything good. My opponent just played bishop e5 correctly. I played rook c6 with the idea to trap the queen, but it doesn't really trap the queen. Actually, yeah, it doesn't really even trap the queen. Queen d4 here, rook c4 trying to harass his queen. Queen a1 here, I played rook c8 back, just crazy. Bishop f3 and rook e8. Bishop d4, rook a8, threatening to take the knight and winning the queen. My opponent dodged it with queen d1, excuse me. Bishop g7, trying to contest this dark square bishop. My opponent plays bishop b6, weird move. Queen c6, attacking the bishop. Bishop back to d4 here. I just took the bishop. try to simplify the game. Queen takes d4. Here I played queen c4, which was a very bad move because now my pawn just infiltrates my position, and after queen c6 my pawn has the very nice move knight d6 and everything is falling. Rook f8 defending f7, queen takes h6, queen c3 trying to get back into g7, queen takes g5 here, queen takes queen g7, and here I was kind of hoping for the trade of queens and try to hold this endgame, but yeah, my opponent just takes on d5, and here just rook d8. I'm completely lost. Like e4, queen f6 threatening the knight, e5 defending the knight, queen f4 trying to create some threats, maybe you will blunder, e3 very nice move, just kicking my queen away. I just go in with the queen, although after bishop g2 my queen is trapped, and there's nothing I can do about that. I'm just waiting to get checkmated at this point. I played rook d7 trying to defend f7 more actively than playing rook f8. Here my opponent just plays queen e4, play rook e7, and my opponent just very precisely plays queen f4, trading the queens, undoubling his pawns, and yeah, we reached this position where I'm completely lost. I was still playing on because I didn't want to give up, pretty much. I was kind of mad. b6 here. Just bishop d5, just saying, yeah, I'm just gonna take this pawn. I think this is the easiest. Just take this pawn and whatever. I can't even take the double pieces because it's just completely lost. I mean, it's completely lost no matter what. So, rook a7, bishop c6, rook c7. I'm gonna, like, I was trying to just, you know, create some threats, you know. I was just playing for stalemate at this point. I was just trying to play for stalemate, you know. Trying to play for stalemate. And here I was kind of getting excited because, you know, here I thought my opponent just blundered into stalemate. Because after h7, like, my king doesn't have squares at all. Next move is going to be checkmate. So I can just sacrifice my rook repeatedly. And I thought that, oh god, maybe like I can draw this, but unfortunately my opponent can go to f5, and yeah, he just dodges the checks eventually. So I took the pawn on h7, he played a5, played rook h6, played a6, I took the pawn on f6, and here, you know, I kind of think that I was trying to get him to mate me with the bishop and knight to try to see if he had the technique, which maybe could have, but like with 1 minute on the clock, pressure, I mean, maybe he would choke it and I would get a draw out of this crazy position, and it would be kind of legendary. But like, yeah, he just didn't even have to do the mate because he just you know, kind of blocked my rook from taking his pawn, and he just threatened to promote to a queen, and I couldn't make anything out of that. And yeah, I just lost this game. It was a very tilting game. This was 4 hours and a half. Just crazy. The game started at 2:30 p.m. and it ended at 7 o'clock. So literally like 4 hours and a half. And the worst thing was that at 8:30 p.m., so 1 hour and a half after I finished this game, I had to play another classical slow game with the black pieces again, and that definitely was the worst part about all of this, and I was very tilted. And yeah, I think I played like kind of a decent game, but like that critical moment on the middle game was just horrible decision making by me, and it kind of just landed me on a horrible position where I just couldn't make chances. And it's frustrating, but it is what it is, you know. I know where I'm like letting the games turn into losses. I know that my weaknesses are definitely in these critical positions in the middle game. So, you know, safe to say that I have to work on NIF, a game plan to work on them for sure. It's called this book that my trainer actually gave me a long time ago, like 5 months ago, and I barely read anything. Like, you can see how big the book is, and I read like some like 20 pages or something, and this is like so long. You know, this marker here marks how many pages I actually read so far, and you can see that I barely read anything. And but yeah, it is what it is, guys. Enough venting. This video is long enough. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye. Take care.